Traditionally, it's the tools, devices that's been displayed. But I'm thinking of maybe we can do something more about the tool or device in practice. We can show the whole process instead of just showing a frozen fixed object inside the glass box. Sometimes they feel reluctant to get close to a wheelchair. But okay, this chair changed their mind because with this, you move the different parts, you can create your own melody. And so the people get ideas of you can live an alternative life on a wheelchair. So this is like an alternative. It is not being disabled. So distinction between able and disabled is being blurred and rethought by the audience who have no idea what history of science or history of biomedicine is. Audience's emotional responses and connection to the artifacts didn't come from being scared or thrilled by the mysterious or frozen or scientific wonder kind of thing, but from the real living experience of their own.
How do you show bioart in any type of museum? There's a reluctance, and reluctance has a foundation because it is difficult, it often requires high technology, which is not always available in museums, and also it requires rigorous maintenance, and this maintenance is a really big problem. And that really reinforces my convictions that you should try as much as possible to use historical illustrations and to compare with contemporary art, not to compare, but to show it along, to contextualize contemporary art. Both the illustrations and the digitized format is nothing compared to the originals. And what I really would like to show is the originals. It's also a question when it comes to collaboration between various either medical or other scientific institutions, contemporary art galleries, academic institutions. There is a reluctance. How can we get over this? How can we get more collaboration between people, between institutions, and how can we really combine this idea of showing scientific, medical work in other venues in order to attract other audiences? Thank you.
How do we know what people are looking at when they walk into a museum? Where there's an object and it's present and a viewer, there's a relationship, and it's this that I'm interested in. I think there's a fine line but a big difference between interactivity, which is what is intended, I think, at science centres where you do something to make something happen, and participatory, where it's up to you to go and get the information. When you look, what happens is you start seeing. This is something that drawing can do. Not only can it evidence that by physically showing that you've done this, but it can itself as an activity start allowing that process, it initiates that process. So this is why I call it drawing my way into understanding. It's a very rare occurrence to sit and spend maybe an hour, maybe with strangers, looking at one thing for that amount of time. Looking at a pencil that's drawing is a method that is often seen as being overly simplistic. It's an old technology, but the activity itself helps the person looking actually in the process of learning what it is they're looking at. Thank you.
I'd love to be able to kind of collect what people come into our collections and draw, so that people can see not only the objects, but how other people have seen the objects.
Picking up something in your hand, it's basically the same stimulus that our ancestors would have used in making tools. And he said picking up a pencil as an infant and scrawling it on a piece of paper is exactly what's going on there.
For me, a wonderful way to draw attention to the materiality of communication, the communication situation, something which is heavily overlooked in the museum context, and even in society more general. How metaphors and how cognition function isn't just something that gets constructed in childhood and then is released from this tactile physicality, but it functions in the moment, it functions in the here and now. So what happens in drawing is actually you feel the pen, you feel the paper, you see the object differently, you have a different communication situation.
And that's really, the drawing is that whole physical nature which is allowing us in a way to touch. But it's also a thing about slowing down.